Hello and welcome to Focus BC with me, Sonia Deol. Coming up, the chaos within Surrey City Council as two ex-Safe Surrey councillors announced they're forming their own political party. We'll be hearing from both of them later on. We start, though, with the conflict between a pipeline company and a First Nation that has been going on for a year in northern BC now. The battle between 5 Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs and the coastal GasLink company back in the headlines as both police and workers are being blocked from accessing a work site. The company saying it has the signed agreement of 20 First Nations groups along the affected route. These 5 hereditary chiefs saying that doesn't include them. Our Sarah McDonald has been in Smithers all week.
The waiting game continues in a remote part of northern BC with work on a contentious pipeline set to resume as opponents to the project refuse to move. Supporters of the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs have set up camp near a crucial access road that is still barricaded by a felled tree, one of dozens blocking a crucial artery for pipeline workers more than a week after a BC Supreme Court judge ordered all obstacles and obstructions removed. The RCMP announcing a criminal investigation into items discovered on site this week: rubber tires covered by tarps with accelerants, kindling and fuel-soaked rags underneath, and more trees half felled and poised to potentially fall at any time. A major safety hazard, as you might imagine, for demonstrators, pipeline workers and RCMP members.
Of course, that prompted them to look a little deeper, and the investigation is continuing.
At the heart of the issue is how Indigenous law is recognized under the Canadian legal system. Coastal GasLink, the energy giant looking to resume work on the $6.6 billion project as soon as possible, already has the support of the provincial and federal governments and the elected chiefs of all 20 First Nations the pipeline runs through across the province. It is the hereditary chiefs and their supporters standing in the way of construction. 14 people were arrested for blockading the same site 1 year ago, and now they are prepared to repeat history again. Hereditary Chief Locke says without the consent of hereditary leaders to put shovels in the ground on Indigenous land, there is simply no consent at all.
Coastal GasLink has no right to talk to us. They can demand all they want.
This lucrative deal has left this sprawling and expansive nation divided, covering 22,000 square kilometers of land and governed by 5 of those elected band councils that want the pipeline built. Gary Naziel, one of those elected band councillors who voted in favor of the pipeline project, which will bring more funds and jobs to the communities that it runs through.
The reason why we wanted this pipeline to go through is it'll bring funds to our membership that we really need.
It's not about the dollars for those opposed to the pipeline on principle, like Cody Merriman, whose wife was one of those people arrested when RCMP moved in on this site last year.
You can't speak about reconciliation while ignoring the traditional governments of these lands. The RCMP needs to change their interactions with Indigenous people.
The big unknown remains if and when RCMP will move in to enforce that injunction order as the standoff continues. Sonia.
Well, let's bring in MLA for the Skeena region, Ellis Ross, who's also the previous Chief Councillor of the Haisla Nation Council, which is an Indigenous group on the West Coast. Ellis, I know you've been watching this story develop very closely. What's your reaction, first of all, to these 5 hereditary chiefs blocking both the police and the workers from accessing this work site?
Very predictable. I was actually invited to that community on a number of occasions to actually talk about LNG and the opportunity. And right from day one, I could see that there was really no way out of this. It was just going to keep escalating.
It has provincial approval, we know that. These 5 chiefs in question are saying that this project has no authority without their consent. In your view, are they right?
I don't know if my view really matters here, because what we're really talking about is the rule of law. We're talking about the Constitution of Canada. We're talking about the authorities in BC, meaning the provincial government. And as far as I know, nobody really questioned that, unless you were talking about the final stages of treaty negotiations under the BC Treaty Commission, or if you talked about maybe settling your rights and title in a context of the courts, say in the Chilcotin. But other than that, I think everybody expects that the rule of law has to be applied by everybody to everybody equally in the province of BC, let alone Canada.
So, I mean, when they come back with saying that they are the authority, they say they're the decision makers, that they have assumed and presumed authority because it's their land, how do you argue back with that in this kind of situation?
You know, there's a lot more people in BC that have to live in a society that surrounds these people. And if you want to apply that logic, then you have to consider there's 203 bands in BC that might take up the same principle. It says we have lawmaking authority, and there's going to be no real way to kind of, oversee this to make sure that it's fair to everybody. Remember, if anybody's going to make laws in this country, you got to understand the Constitution, the Charter, the rights of people, regardless if you're Aboriginal or not. I mean, I don't want to go to a place where I don't know the laws from one region to another. It just doesn't make any sense.
So why is it so difficult to work that out then? Because it seems that this is a repeated situation. It happens with various projects. We've seen this happening in BC, where there's such difference of opinion depending on which First Nation group you're speaking to. Can there ever be agreement across the board?
Well, there's supposed to be agreement because basically everything that we know about Aboriginals' title in terms of the principles have already been decided upon in the courts of BC and Canada. And the rights and title case law that we're talking about is something that even John Horgan and his government admitted has to be abided by. And even if you're talking about the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, the government said we'd have to view that through the lens of Section 35 of the Constitution and the jurisprudence, which means we've got to look at cases like Haida, Mikisew Cree, even Delgamuukw for that matter. So in this regard, I think everybody's ignoring the fact that case law principles have already defined, how we're supposed to deal with these types of issues on the ground.
Yeah, this is the part that I really don't understand, that when the company is saying that it has consent and approval from 20 elected First Nations groups, and then you have this camp of 5 hereditary chiefs saying that not as far as they're concerned, it is their land and the company doesn't have the authority to go ahead. How do you resolve that? How do you bring agreement across those groups themselves?
It's a complicated picture because what you're talking about is leadership. And you're talking about representation. And the only people that can really answer that is the community members in question. And from my travels around BC, I've discovered that a lot of people don't understand the difference between Indian Act elected representatives versus hereditary. I mean, one's basically chosen by the people to represent them, and the other one is basically chosen by birthright. A lot of Aboriginals don't understand the difference, and therefore they don't have an opinion.
So are you saying that those that have the authority by birthright do not have as much say as, or shouldn't have as much say as those that are elected?
No, what I'm saying is that the people in question that are actually underneath this fight, this struggle for leadership, they're the only ones that can answer it, the community members.
Okay.
I mean, in some cases, there's some villages that have hereditary leadership and they don't have an Indian Act elected leadership. And in some cases, they have elected leadership. It's up to the community to decide that.
And we're just running out of time, but just very, very briefly, finally, as far as the province is concerned and the way it's handled this so far, what's your take on that?
They haven't handled it at all. They haven't done anything. In fact, they've actually fed the anti-LNG rhetoric over the last 5-6 years, and they basically refused to actually fix any of that rhetoric. And now a lot of that rhetoric is still hanging around today.
Ellis Ross, thank you very much for your time today.
You're very welcome.
Well, coming up, we'll be speaking to the 2 Surrey City councillors who have just announced they're launching their own political party. Back in a couple of minutes.
You're watching Focus BC on Global.
Welcome back. So the chaos within Surrey City Council continues. 2 of its councillors announcing this week that they are teaming up to launch their own political party. Councillors Brenda Locke and Councillor Jack Hundall join us now. Thank you very much, both of you, for your time today. Remind us, first of all, starting with you, Councillor Locke, you were both members of the Safe Surrey Coalition at one point. You left us as independents last year, and your reasons were what?
Well, I think the most important reason was we tried to work with the mayor, and clearly he had a my way or the highway attitude, and he was very focused on what he wanted to do, and there was just no room for the democratic process to exist. So it was time for us to say, look, we can't work under those conditions, and we left. And
Councillor Handel, for you?
For me, you know, myself and Brenda were independents before even joining with the mayor's team. But certainly it was the pivotal moment for me was when the mayor decided to collapse the Public Safety Committee and not put anything in to backfill it as we go through this really, really dynamic process.
So for both of you, you're clearly not happy with Mayor McCallum, his style of leadership, the way he's been conducting things on council, but setting up your own party, that's quite drastic. So how did this come about?
Well, I think that one of the most important things was we know that Surrey is going to be the largest city in British Columbia in the future. We're building a modern city for the 21st century, and that isn't happening when you're consolidating everything you do into one issue only, which is the police transition. There's a lot more to Surrey than just the police transition.
So this new party is called Surrey Connect.
Yes.
How long have you both been talking about this? Councillor Handel?
I would say really it's probably, you know, in the background, probably for a few weeks now, and certainly after that budget, the last budget that we had in December there, that was really probably the defining moment to say, look, if you know, every budget's going to be like this, we need to actually create a positive and a vision of hope for the city as well. Because as Councillor Locke said, it's, you know, if we're just consuming all of our resources into one project, one program, really that's not how we're going to grow and develop the first modern city of the 21st century.
So what is the platform for Surrey Connect, or are you is it too early to say?
Well, there's certainly lots of issues that are going to be on our platform. I can tell you for sure openness and transparency is one of them. And Councillor Handel took the lead in the beginning about talking about having an ethics commissioner for Surrey. That's vitally important to us and certainly to him. Those are sort of those core value issues. But then there's also the platform, and yes, we have looked at a number of those things. Things like infrastructure and the need for infrastructure in a growing city like Surrey.
You know, both Save Surrey and Surrey First are parties that have been around for a very long time. So how do you expect to compete with that? What appetite is there in Surrey for this new party?
I think there's quite the appetite for it. You know, Surrey is one of those sort of unique communities where we've been on one party basically for 15 years in power, and we would look at other neighboring municipalities where they actually have, you know, diverse opinions from different platforms and different ideologies at the municipal level as well. You know, that exists in Vancouver, in Burnaby, at White Rock, and other communities. So I think it's a little bit different for Surrey, but certainly it's in keeping with where we want to go forward as a city.
Okay, so you guys have now filed the paperwork. At what stage? What happens next now?
Well, now we just get out and do the work. We're going out into our community, into our 6 town centres. We'll go to people's kitchens and wherever they want to meet with us, because we do want to hear. We want to connect with our community in a much more substantive way than we have been doing for the past year on this council.
What's been the reaction so far?
I think the reaction's been really positive for us. I mean, we received multitude, not just emails and phone calls and through social media, but even people we hadn't otherwise even had met before have reached out and said, look, where can we help? Where can we sign up? And what we sort of tell everyone is just get onto the website for now, sign up for the newsletter, and as we grow and develop over the coming months, there'll be more coming out.
And have you had any reaction from Mayor McCallum?
No, I didn't expect I'd have any reaction from Mayor McCallum. But no, he hasn't reached out to us.
Okay, and now how does this work on council now? What's the makeup?
Well, currently the mayor has 4 city councillors that are on his team, and there are 3 independents, and now our party, Surrey Connect. Surrey First has 1 member, and Councillor Pettigrew is an independent. So we've reached out to Councillors Annis and Pettigrew, and we'll talk to them in the coming weeks and months.
What is the latest? Are they showing any signs of wanting to join you?
Well, Councillor Pettigrew has expressed an interest. He just wants to do a bit more research, I think. And of course, for Councillor Annis, I mean, she's still part of a party, so I think that needs to be resolved, and certainly that's her work to do, I think. But, you know, the door is open and it's welcome to not just them, but any other members of council.
What's your feeling at this stage? Do you think you will be able to convince other councillors to join you?
You know, we haven't kind of crossed that bridge other than our dialogue with Councillor Pettigrew. It's up to them moving forward.
What is the atmosphere on council like right now?
You know, it's absolutely split. There's no doubt about it. And we saw it's not just a split on council. There's an absolute split in our community. And we saw that on December 16th during that budget vote. This has been a very divisive time for Surrey. It is quite unproductive. And to me, it's a demonstration of the lack of leadership in our city.
It was absolute anarchy, and we're just seeing pictures of that, of when the budget was passed through. A lot of people who live here say they've never seen anything like it. That must make pushing things through, even talking about the issues that affect people in Surrey, very difficult on council right now.
It is difficult, but you know, we will continue to work together and, you know, underpin, you know, the best democratic process we can in those conversations out, you know, certainly in council chambers and out on the floor, and certainly in the office as well. So, you know, I am looking forward to continue to work in collaboration with anyone who wants to work together. But you're absolutely right, though, and I think this is where other levels of government, certainly at the provincial and federal level, need to take a look at this transition plan and say, you know what, and despite the mayor saying there's been overwhelming support for it, when you actually look at the numbers, there's not.
OK, well, listen, thank you both very much for your time. This is a huge step you've both taken. Let's see how it all plays out. Councillor Locke and Councillor Hundle, thank you for joining us here on Focus BC. Let me go now to our Richard Zisman, who is standing by in Victoria. Richard, huge, like I said. What are the challenges with doing something like this?
Yeah, Sonia, it's interesting because political parties matter much less on the municipal level than they do on the provincial or the federal levels. When you have a federal or provincial party, they often will have party status, and that means money and resources. At the municipal level, we don't have the same sort of funding model. So ultimately, parties only really matter around election time. And as we all know, it's still a few years away from the next municipal election in Surrey. It's going to be important to see how the pair do in terms of fundraising. It's also going to be interesting, as you alluded to, whether they're able to recruit some additional councillors. But right now, Doug McCallum and his party do have a majority of the votes on council. So they still will be able to dictate their agenda and keep pushing forward their decisions on the budget, as we've seen, as well as other potential moves from the council level in terms of what's going to happen with that police transition.
We did reach out to Mayor Doug McCallum, and we didn't hear a response in terms of coming on. No surprises there. But do you think he's going to? Do you think this is going to bother him much?
I think part of it is, as you know, politicians often get insulted easily when their allies decide to abandon them. Both Jack Hundle and Brenda Locke ran with McCallum as part of a slate. That slate did extremely well. They basically swept through Surrey, winning all the seats except for that of Linda Annis. They took over the mayor's chair from Linda Hepner. So there was big success from the coalition that McCallum had built, and now that coalition is starting to erode. So I think that's a sign that would obviously frustrate McCallum. All
right, you'll be happy to know that coming up after the break, we're going to be talking about one of your favourite subjects. It is ride-hailing in the province. What is the latest? What's going on? We'll have that for you in a couple of minutes.
You're watching Focus BC on Global.
Welcome back to Focus BC. All right, let's go back to Richard Zisman in Victoria, and we are going to start with a subject that you absolutely love talking about, and that is ride-hailing. It's still not here.
It is not here yet, Sonia. It is one of the most interesting, complex political issues that this government has faced. There are so many questions about the process in which the government has undertaken, and we're still sitting here waiting for the Passenger Transportation Board, which is independent from government, to make some approvals. The promise was that ride-sharing would be here by the end of 2019. Obviously, with the calendar now reading 2020, that was a broken promise.
So what's the situation now? Because the Liberals are obviously making real hay with this. Do we have any updates at all from the province on what is going on?
The issue here, and we've talked about this a bunch on the show, Sonia, is the province gave up a lot of power by letting the Passenger Transportation Board make these decisions. And the province can't tell the PTB at this point, work faster, because they are independent. I continue to ask the PTB for details around why it's taking so long. They have not provided any of the information. What we know is the PTB is a small organization, just 6 permanent staff. They are working through 22 applications. They have already ruled on 2 of them, one an approval, one they turned down, and we have no new timeline from the PTB on when we may hear about some of these major ride-sharing companies like Uber and Lyft and whether they're actually approved to operate here in BC.
Does the province think that this hurts them in any way, or don't they care?
I think one of the things we heard from Premier Horgan before the holidays was that he doesn't think the public really cares about the fact that he's missed the deadline on this promise. I think there is a growing frustration, though, from people that they were expecting this service to come. The service is not here. And then beyond that, Sonia, the question is, what is the service we're going to even see? The Labour Relations Board is reviewing whether Uber and Lyft have to make their drivers employees. It's very possible they decide that, which could mean Uber and Lyft never even end up operating here in British Columbia. And a lot of people could think that may be a good thing, considering the track record of those companies. So there's a lot of things still at play here, and the province has lost a lot of the control. Now,
we have to squeeze this in before we leave the show today, and that is, of course, the big royal scandal. Meghan and Harry, lots of speculation that Meghan is where you are right now, somewhere in Victoria. We don't know that for sure. But, you know, big questions around who's going to pay for their security if they end up living here.
Yeah, and the big question is, what role are they going to continue to have? If they are on official visit, like we saw with Will and Kate when they were here a few years ago, it comes with it a huge bill from the RCMP. They are required to have security because of their status. But if they do end up being truly independent like they would like, it's not clear whether they would actually have the RCMP support, which they would have if they were on official business. So if they come here as official royals, as part of, their mission on behalf of the Queen, then the taxpayer will end up paying. But if they don't have that, then my guess is they'll have to end up footing the bill themselves for some security to ensure that they believe they're safe when they're either traveling or potentially living in British Columbia.
And this property that they're speculated to be at, you've walked around that in your spare time, I hear.
Well, it was work time, and I believe that this is going to be more of a vacation property than it will be a full-time home. If they do move to Canada, like the speculation, Sonia, I think you and I both agree it's probably more likely Toronto, maybe Vancouver. I don't think island life is something that would suit them very well, but maybe for a vacation, that's a property they could fall in love with.
Yeah, read into that what you will. Thank you very much for watching.
Thanks,
Thanks, Richard. We'll see you back here next week. Take care.